He said it clearly enough that I heard it through the study door. He's already showing signs, and the voice that answered him was my wife's. I am Reginald Dunbar. Reg, to anyone who's known me longer than a Tuesday, 66 years old, retired civil engineer. And until that Thursday night in November, a man who believed he understood the load-bearing structure of his own life. I'd spent 38 years building infrastructure across northern Ontario, poured concrete in -30 weather on the Trans-Canada near Wawa, drove steel pilings into the shield bedrock to anchor a bridge over the Nipigon River that still carries 18-wheelers without flinching. I know what solid ground feels like. I know better than most people what gives way. Standing in the hallway of my own home in Ancaster that night, I realized I had been standing on nothing. Before I go any further, tell me where you're watching from in the comments. And if you've ever had someone you trusted try to quietly erase you while smiling over dinner, hit like and subscribe. You'll want to stay for every word. The occasion was the Miriam Dunbar Foundation Gala 2 nights away. My late wife Miriam had started the foundation 20 years ago. Scholarships for young people from Northern Ontario communities, kids from Sioux Lookout and Marathon and Kapuskasing, who were brilliant and hungry and just needed someone to open a door. After she died 11 years ago, I kept it going. Every November, we filled the Hamilton Convention Center. City councilors, university presidents, contractors, engineers, 180 people who had known Miriam's work, or simply believed what she'd believed, that where you start shouldn't determine where you finish. I had been married to my second wife, Colette, for 9 years. She was 53, composed, meticulous. She ran the household, the social calendar, the gala committee. I was grateful for all of it. Running a life at 66 while managing trust documents from 4 decades of engineering work is not a small thing. I let her handle things. My son Miles was 35, commercial real estate broker in Toronto, went to Queens. His mother's eyes, my stubbornness. He'd been spending more time in Hamilton over the past year, for the signing, as I came to understand. Our family lawyer, Margot, was coming in 2 mornings' time to finalize the documents, adding Colette as co-trustee of the Dunbar Family Trust. That trust held the house appraised at $1.4 million, 2 rental properties in Hamilton's East End, and my RRIF accounts, just over $3 million in total. Miles had suggested the arrangement 8 months earlier, right after my cardiac event. Minor, a blockage, a stent, 3 days in hospital at Hamilton General. Miles sat across from me in the discharge room with a yellow legal pad and said we had to be realistic. Colette should have signing authority in case of emergency. Good planning. I agreed because I was tired and I trusted him. Ashton Vance had been Miles's closest friend since first year at Queen's. They'd gone into business together 3 years ago, brokering commercial properties across the GTA. Ashton was polished in a way that made you feel slightly underdressed no matter what you had on. He called me sir the first time we met, and somehow made the word sound like a door being measured for a lock. He'd been at every family dinner for 2 years, always with a good bottle of wine, always laughing just a fraction too loud at things I said. I hadn't trusted him, but I trusted Miles. The night everything came apart was a Thursday. I came downstairs at 10:30, a habit since the cardiac event, the body adjusting to a new rhythm. I was heading to the study for a glass of water. The door was half shut, light underneath. Then I heard Ashton's voice. He's already showing signs. And Colette, I know. The episode at the grocery store last week, I made sure Maria saw it. Maria came Wednesdays. Maria was our housekeeper who had watched me mislabel a jar of tahini as coffee and laughed with me about it. Now I understood the look on her face in the driveway the week before. Not warmth, documentation. I should have walked through that door. Everything in me was ready to. But I'd spent 15 years as a union site foreman, and I knew what happened when you moved before you had your evidence in order. You handed the other side the only advantage they'd ever need. So I stood in the hallway and breathed carefully, and that was when Miles grabbed my arm from behind. He must have come downstairs behind me. I hadn't heard him. He pulled me back into the shadow of the hall and pressed 2 fingers to his lips. His face in the low light was not frightened. It was calm in a way I didn't recognize as my son's face. He brought me to the kitchen and ran the exhaust fan. He told me he'd known for 6 weeks. He'd found out through something Ashton let slip at a client dinner after too much scotch. He said he hadn't come to me yet because he needed to understand how far it had gone before he moved. How far? I said. He explained it the way he'd explain a deal gone sideways. Clean and clinical. Colette and Ashton had been together for at least a year. Ashton had debts from a collapsed development project in Mississauga, serious debt, the kind held by people who didn't send letters. The Dunbar Trust was his exit. Once Colette had signing authority, she could authorize distributions. Once I was declared incapable under the Substitute Decisions Act, she could apply for guardianship of property. There was already a psychiatric assessment filed, a doctor in Burlington who'd never met me, claiming early cognitive decline. Colette had been building a file for months. The grocery store, my keys, a dozen small moments staged or reframed into evidence. I looked at Miles. I looked at the yellow legal pad in my memory. You suggested adding her to the trust, I said. He looked at the counter. I thought I could manage it. Manage it in whose favor? He didn't answer. I understood the answer perfectly. I need 48 hours, I said. Don't contact Ashton. Don't say anything to Colette. Can you do that? He said yes. He was lying about something and I knew it, but I needed him to believe he was still inside the game. After he left, I went to the study and opened my laptop. 3 years ago, I'd installed a voice-activated audio monitor in that room after a watch went missing and I suspected a contractor. I'd checked the cloud folder maybe twice since then. I'd forgotten it was running. I sat in that study until 4 in the morning. What those recordings contained was not an affair. It was a project schedule. Colette and Ashton at my own desk, running through the timeline the way you run a construction program. Which accounts to move first? Who at the care facility owed Ashton a favor? The phrase "beyond contesting anything" came up twice. At one point, Colette said, "The gala is actually perfect. If he has any kind of episode in front of all those people." "It doesn't even have to be real," Ashton said. "No," she said, "it doesn't." I closed the laptop. I went upstairs and lay on top of the covers in my clothes and stared at the ceiling until it went gray with dawn. Roy Steadman had been my closest friend since we worked together on the 400 series through Barry 25 years ago. He ran a small private consulting firm on King Street now. Background checks, asset searches, discreet work requiring patience. He looked at my face when I walked in that morning and said, "Sit down," without asking why. He called a contact who'd spent 15 years in Hamilton Police's Elder Financial Abuse Unit. Her name was Constance. Retired now, but she still consulted. She reviewed what I had, the audio files, a laboratory report I'd gotten from a pharmacist on Upper James after dropping off Colette's wellness supplements for testing. The pharmacist had found a sedative-adjacent compound not listed on the label, something designed to make an old man seem to be losing his grip without leaving a dramatic signature. Constance was quiet for a long time after she read everything. "I can open a file," she said, "but I want one of them saying something explicit on a clean recording. Something that can't be explained as a misunderstanding. Can you make that happen?" "Give me tonight," I said. That evening I sat at the dinner table with Miles and Colette and Ashton. Everyone was performing something. They were performing triumph. I was performing decline. Midway through the main course, I set down my fork. I let my eyes drift past Ashton to the middle distance, the way I'd seen older men look when the room has become too much. Then I said quietly, "I've been thinking about the foundation. I want to give it all away. The whole trust endowment. I want to transfer it to the Lakehead University engineering faculty. Just give it over." The table went absolutely still. Colette touched my hand. "Sweetheart, you're tired. The gala is tomorrow. We can talk about this after." I wasn't watching Colette, I was watching Miles. He'd set his knife flat on the table the way you do when you don't want to be seen gripping anything. His jaw had tightened. "Dad," he said carefully, "you've spent 40 years building that trust. That's not a dinner table decision." "Why not?" I said. "It's my money. I built it. Shouldn't I be able to give it wherever I want?" Ashton smiled across the table, the smile of a man watching an obstacle remove itself. He glanced at Colette. The glance said, "Perfect." Miles looked at me. I watched him decide. He was calculating whether to align with me and risk the plan or let me play confused and protect the position he still had. He chose the money. They always do in the end, and the choosing shows you who they are more clearly than any conversation. "Let's revisit it after the gala," Miles said. I nodded slowly as if I'd been managed. He thought he was managing me. He was wrong about the direction. The next afternoon, Ashton offered to help carry some gala materials to the basement. When we were downstairs, beside the old furnace, he changed. He waited until Colette's footsteps moved away from the top of the stairs. Then he turned to face me and the smile was entirely gone. "You should understand something," he said. "The application under the Substitute Decisions Act gets filed Monday morning. Once it's in front of the court, your accounts get flagged and your lawyer gets frozen out. We've been building this file for 4 months. He stepped closer. "So whatever you were doing at dinner, it doesn't matter. You can make this comfortable, or you can spend the next 2 years in proceedings that cost you everything. Your choice." He wasn't angry. He was the same way he was in business, efficient and without sentiment. He didn't know I had a digital recorder in my shirt pocket, thumb already on the button since before I'd picked up the first box. "I understand," I said quietly. I don't want to be a burden to anyone." He clapped me on the shoulder. "That's the right attitude," he said, and went back upstairs. I stood by the furnace for a while, listening to the pilot flame, then sent the recording to Constance. That night I waited until Colette came to check on me. She was performing concern now, taking my pulse, asking if I'd slept, and after she turned off the lamp I spoke into the dark. "Colette." My voice was muddy, sleepy, confused. "When Ashton was helping me downstairs today, he was on the phone. He didn't know I could hear. I let a beat pass. He said something about an older woman being managed the same way once the documents were done. What does that mean?" The silence that followed was the longest I have ever sat through. "Go to sleep, Reginald," she said. But her voice was different. I had put a hairline crack in the wall and I felt it the same way I feel a stressed beam, not with instruments, but with years. Constance texted me at 10 the next morning. She called him at 4 p.m. 40-minute call. He spent the last 10 minutes trying to talk her down. The triangle had fractured. They were going into the gala already watching each other. I arrived through the service entrance at 7:15. Roy and Constance were at a table near the back. 2 officers from the Elder Abuse Unit were at the bar in plainclothes. The foundation board chair had agreed, without asking why, to small change in the program. At 8 o'clock, Colette was standing at the edge of the head table believing I was in hospital. Ashton had been working the room for 40 minutes, positioning himself as the man stepping up in a difficult time, suggesting to 2 board members that perhaps the trust structure deserved reconsideration given my health. He'd already had the check in his mind for so long he'd stopped hiding it in his eyes. The board chair stepped to the lectern. "Before the scholarship presentations this evening," she said, "we've had a last-minute address from our founder." The lights came up. I walked through the side door. I have walked onto a lot of sites in 38 years. Sites where the subcontractors were cutting corners, where the inspector had been paid, where the structure that looked finished was rotten underneath. You learn to walk those floors a certain way, slow enough that everyone has time to see you, steady enough that no one doubts where the authority is. I got to the lectern. I looked at the room. I looked at Colette, whose face was doing something I had never seen before. Not fear exactly, but the look of someone watching a load-bearing wall they bet against hold. I looked at Ashton, who had gone the color of wet concrete. I said what needed to be said. I kept it short. I said I had recordings, a laboratory report, documentation of a fraudulent psychiatric assessment, and testimony from a woman in Kitchener who had been deceived by the same man in a parallel way. I said constables from Hamilton Police were present, and that charges under the Criminal Code and the Substitute Decisions Act had been authorized. I delivered it the way I would deliver a site safety report. Factual, no heat in it. The heat had burned off sometime around 4 in the morning 2 nights before, while I sat in my study listening to my wife discuss the schedule of my destruction. Colette was on her feet before I finished. She said my name. She said Ashton had manipulated her. Ashton said I was having a psychotic break. Constance walked from the back of the room. The 2 officers followed her. The room watched. I stepped back from the lectern and let the officers do their work. They were professional. It was quiet, the kind of quiet that follows a building coming down, not loud, just final. We completed the scholarship presentations afterward. Miriam's name was on that event, and the students who'd driven down from Thunder Bay deserved their evening. When the last scholarship was handed out, a young woman from Nipigon accepted her certificate with both hands and said, "Thank you the way you say thank you when something has changed your life." I stood at the edge of the stage and watched her and thought, this is what it was all for. Later, sitting in my old Ram pickup in the parking garage, I called Miles. He picked up on the second ring. "I'm sorry," he said. I believed him. I also believed that being sorry and having done what he'd done were 2 things that could live in a person at the same time, and that being sorry was the beginning of something, not the end of it. "Margot is restructuring the trust," I said. "What was designated for you in your mother's original provision stays. But the house goes on the market, and I'm putting $900,000 into the foundation endowment. Miriam's name on it permanently." Silence on the line. "I really was going to warn you," he said. "You were going to warn me once you'd decided it was in your interest to warn me," I said. "That's not the same thing." I looked through the windshield at the ramp above me, the narrow strip of November sky. "You're my son and I love you. And what I'm saying now isn't punishment, it's just what I need. Go figure out who you are when there's no inheritance to position yourself around. When you've done that, when I can see it, call me." He didn't say anything for a moment. "Where are you going?" he asked. "North," I said. "I built a lot of roads up there. I might as well drive on them." I hung up. I started the truck. The engine turned over with the particular roughness of a V8 that hasn't been pushed in a while, then found its rhythm. I rolled down the window as I came up the ramp and out into the November air. The city was wet and orange under the lights, a line of cars at the Tim Hortons drive-thru doing what Canadians do when the world is uncertain, getting coffee and moving slowly forward. I drove toward the 400. The truck knew the corridor. I'd driven it 100 times in 38 years, always toward a project, always with a set of plans on the passenger seat. Tonight the seat was empty, and for the first time in longer than I could measure, I didn't feel the need to fill it. I am Reginald Dunbar. I built bridges that will outlast me by 100 years, roads that carry people from where they are to where they need to be, without them ever thinking about what's underneath. I built those things because I believed a foundation was meant to hold. I still believe it. I just know now that the foundation has to be honest, and if it isn't, the only thing to do is tear it back to the bedrock and start again. If you've ever had to walk away from the life you built in order to keep the life that matters, leave me a comment. Tell me where you're watching from. Tell me what you walked away from. And remember, a cracked foundation isn't the end of the building. Sometimes it's just the ground telling you where to dig. Hit like and subscribe for more stories of truth and justice. I'll see you in the next one. Keep your eyes open and your footing solid.